Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to explore a really monumental shift in how we build secure software. We're diving right into Chapter 14 of our source material, and we're talking about modernizing security by doing something that, honestly, would have sounded absolutely crazy just a decade ago. We are talking about completely abandoning traditional passwords. For years now, there's been this ongoing war in software development between user friction on one side and robust security on the other. You know the drill. You usually had to sacrifice one to get the other. But today, passwordless login is fundamentally changing that entire dynamic. It's really not just about making things more convenient for the user anymore. It is a critical security upgrade designed to protect systems against some of the absolute most sophisticated, automated modern threats on the web. So, let's dive into this and look at exactly how modern developers are pulling this off.
Look, we have all been there. You're trying to log into an app, but you just can't remember your password to save your life. Was it your dog's name plus your birth year? No, wait, that was your bank account. Maybe it's that completely generic password that the system forced you to change last month. So after 5 failed attempts and a highly frustrating captcha test that makes you question your basic human ability to identify crosswalks and traffic lights, you finally just throw your hands up and click Forgot Password. It's a universal, incredibly frustrating experience. Passwords have defeated you once again. And if we look at this from a business perspective, the cost of this friction is just massive. Every forgotten password translates directly to abandoned shopping carts, lost daily active users, and a relentless flood of IT support tickets that completely drain company resources.
But you can relax because passwordless authentication is the definitive solution to this endless cycle of password resets and ridiculous security questions. What we're really talking about here is a massive paradigm shift. We're moving from knowledge-based authentication to possession-based authentication. So instead of relying on a secret string of characters that users are inevitably going to forget or reuse, something developers are implementing systems where the application authenticates you through something you already have access to, like your email inbox or your mobile device. By verifying possession of a highly secure private channel, we essentially remove the cognitive load from the user completely. It is literally the ultimate rescue for user friction.
Okay. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. Section 1, the password problem. Section 2, how magic links work. Section 3, securing magic links. Section 4, the reality of OTPs. And Section 5, magic links versus OTPs.
Let's start with Section 1, the password problem.
So why exactly are we trying to get rid of passwords in the first place? Well, let's be real. Human beings simply do not have the biological hardware to remember long, complex cryptographic strings. Because of this, users rely on weak, easily guessable passwords, or even worse, they rely on password reuse. Just consider this for a second. The average web user might have over 300 active online accounts. Nobody can remember 300 unique, complex passwords without a password manager, so they reuse the exact same credentials. When a breach happens on one poorly secured random website, hackers harvest those emails and passwords. They then use automated bots to test those leaked credentials across dozens of unrelated, highly secure services, which is a devastating technique known as credential stuffing. To really understand the alternative, let's look at a great anecdote from our source text about a user named Alice. So Alice is shopping for shoes on acme.com. She goes to log in, but instead of the usual username and password fields, there's just one single box asking for her email address. Her immediate reaction is confusion, maybe a little suspicion. She thinks, where's the password field? Did ACME forget it? Have I been hacked? She types her email, clicks submit, and gets an email saying, click this link to log in. She clicks it, boom, she's in. That initial surprise instantly turns into total delight. No passwords, no security questions, just one single click.
Moving right along to Section 2, how magic links work.
Magic links are essentially the instant digital port keys of the authentication world. They instantly transport a user directly into an authenticated, secure session. Let's break down exactly how this digital magic trick operates behind the scenes in 5 chronological steps. First up, the user requests a login link by entering their email address into the application interface. Second, the backend application does all the heavy lifting. It generates a highly secure, time-limited token. And to be clear, this isn't just a random word. It's a cryptographically secure string with extremely high entropy. A cryptographic hash of this token is then safely stored in the backend database. Third, the app constructs a login URL for the user, appending that plain token as a query parameter at the very end of that web address and emails it right out. Fourth, the user opens their inbox and clicks the link, which instantly redirects their browser back to a specific endpoint on the application. And finally, step 5, the app extracts the token from the URL, hashes it, compares it to what is saved in the database, checks the expiration timestamp, and, if everything matches perfectly, securely authenticates the user.
Now, as we look at this architectural flow, there is a massive security pitfall here that backend developers absolutely have to avoid during step 1. When the user requests that link, it is absolutely critical that your system does not reveal whether the email actually exists in your database. If you tell the user email not found, you are basically opening the door for attackers to perform what is known as an email enumeration attack. A malicious script could ping your login endpoint thousands of times a second with a massive dictionary of email addresses, just observing which ones return email not found and which ones actually go through. They then harvest all those valid ones for targeted phishing campaigns. Instead, your system should always return a generic message like, if an account exists, we've sent a login link. This tiny little detail is completely vital for protecting user privacy and preventing malicious account harvesting.
Now for Section 3, Securing Magic Links.
Of course, any system that completely bypasses passwords is going to introduce new vulnerabilities. There's no getting around that. The biggest and most prevalent risk with magic links is, without a doubt, phishing. Because magic links train users over time to simply open an email and click a link to log in, it actively builds a sort of muscle memory that totally bypasses skepticism. Users get used to the frictionless experience and they just let their guard down. So if an attacker knows a user has an account with Acme, they can spoof the sender domain and send a highly convincing fake email pretending to be the application. I mean, it looks just like the real thing. The user, operating purely on that trained muscle memory, clicks the fraudulent link. But instead of logging into Acme, they are redirected to a malicious proxy server that either silently steals their active session or tricks them into handing over further sensitive information.
The really crucial takeaway here is that security is a lot like an expensive home alarm system. Think about it. You can spend $50,000 on the absolute best deadbolts, high-tech motion sensors, and reinforced glass windows. But if you leave the physical keys sitting right under the front welcome mat, an intruder doesn't need to break your encryption at all. They just lift the mat and walk right in through the front door. Human behavior is the ultimate uncontrollable variable. Even if your back-end cryptography is totally flawless, if a user carelessly clicks a fake login link in a cleverly disguised phishing email, your system is compromised. Security is truly only as strong as its weakest link, and in a possession-based system like this, protecting the channel of possession is everything. To actually mitigate these risks, developers have to strictly adhere to back-end implementation rules. First, let's talk about the token itself. The magic here is really just a temporary digital key. Developers will often use JSON Web Tokens, known as JWT, or HMAC encryption to cryptographically sign the token. This basically ensures it cannot be manipulated. However, relying purely on a stateless JWT does have some drawbacks, which is exactly why storing a hashed version of the token in your backend database is often the preferred method. Database storage allows you to instantly track authentication attempts, enforce rate limiting to stop brute force abuse, and, most importantly, immediately invalidate the token after its very first use. And that invalidation is exactly how you prevent replay attacks. A replay attack is when a malicious actor intercepts the token in transit and tries to use it again. If the token is strictly single-use, the intercepted link is immediately dead on arrival. Additionally, these tokens must be extremely short-lived. We're talking expiring in 5 to 15 minutes. If a user doesn't click the link right away, no big deal, they just have to request a new one. Finally, never ever send the token as plain text in the body of the email. You want to hide it behind a proper, recognizable HTML button. Modern enterprise email scanners will actually automatically click plain text links to scan them for malware, which could accidentally use up that single-use token before the human user ever even sees the email, causing endless frustration.
Okay, let's jump into Section 4, the reality of OTPs.
If magic links are the sleek, frictionless, one-click future, one-time passwords, or OTPs, are kind of the battle-tested, slightly chaotic, but highly versatile alternative. They definitely require a bit more effort from the user, but they provide some really unique security and architectural advantages. Unlike self-contained magic links, OTPs demand manual user interaction, which intentionally introduces a little bit of friction. The sequence starts off similarly. The user requests an OTP by providing their email or phone number. The app generates a code and sends it via SMS, email, or an authenticator app. But then, the waiting game begins. The user actually has to wait to receive the code, physically read it, flip back over to your application, and manually input those specific digits before the server-side timer runs out. This whole app switching routine can sometimes cause a drop in conversion rates on mobile devices compared to magic links, but it remains a global standard for a very good reason.
In the back-end process for OTPs, after verifying the user's contact information, the server generates a cryptographically random 6 to 8-digit code. It is absolutely vital that this generation process uses high entropy. The code cannot be predictable in any way, or an attacker could potentially guess it before the timer expires. The server temporarily stores a hash of this OTP in the database and assigns a strict countdown timer to it. The plaintext code travels to the user's device, and the user submits it back through the client interface. The server then hashes the submitted code, compares it to the database, and if it's a match, access is granted. Once validated, just like we saw with magic links, the system must immediately and permanently delete that OTP record from the database to ensure it remains strictly single use.
Now, OTPs can absolutely act as a standalone, passwordless login method. But where they become incredibly powerful is when they act as the something you have factor alongside a traditional password in a multi-factor authentication or MFA setup. Think back to the credential stuffing attacks we discussed earlier, where bots test thousands of leaked passwords across the web. MFA stops this dead in its tracks. MFA relies on combining something you know, like a password, with something you have, like a mobile phone receiving an OTP. By combining these two very distinct factors, even if a hacker completely compromises a user's password in a massive data breach, they are completely blocked at the front door. Without physical access to the user's personal device to retrieve that temporary OTP, the stolen password is computationally useless.
Implementing OTPs effectively really requires strict adherence to industry best practices. First off, lifespans must be remarkably short, usually anywhere from 30 seconds to a maximum of maybe 5 minutes. You also absolutely must implement strict rate limiting on both the generation request and the entry of the OTPs. For instance, you should lock out an IP address or user account after 5 failed OTP entry attempts per minute. This effectively stops automated bots from brute force guessing the 6-digit code. And from a modern security architecture standpoint, you should heavily encourage the use of authenticator apps, like Google Authenticator or Authy, over SMS delivery. SMS is just highly vulnerable these days. Let's talk about why for a second. Attackers can actually execute a SIM swap by simply calling up a telecom provider, socially engineering the customer service rep, and porting the victim's phone number to a device the hacker controls. Just like that, suddenly the hacker is receiving all of the victim's OTPs. Furthermore, SMS relies on the outdated SS7 network routing protocol, which has known vulnerabilities that allow sophisticated attackers to intercept text messages right in transit. Authenticator apps completely bypass these network vulnerabilities by using time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP. They generate the codes locally and entirely offline via a shared secret key.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 5, Magic Links versus OTPs, and choosing the right tool. Let's dive deep into this side-by-side comparison to really help you choose the right tool for your specific application. Looking at user effort, Magic Links are the clear winner here. A single click from an inbox is vastly superior to the manual memorization and typing that's required for an OTP. For speed, Magic Links also generally win out, provided the email provider delivers the message instantly, of course. However, security risks tell a slightly different story. Magic Links are profoundly dependent on the security of the user's email account. If a user's Gmail or Outlook account gets compromised, the attacker has instant, unmitigated access to your application. OTPs, especially SMS OTPs, carry their own risks, namely the SIM swapping and network interception vulnerabilities we just detailed. So, what are the ideal use cases? Well, it really comes down to what exactly you are building. If you're developing a consumer newsletter platform, an e-commerce storefront, or a community forum where seamless, rapid access is the absolute priority to maintain high conversion rates, go with Magic Links. The friction reduction is absolutely worth it. On the other hand, if you're building a B2B fintech dashboard, a healthcare application handling sensitive patient data, or an internal administrative portal, you should lean heavily towards OTPs, specifically TOTP authenticator apps, and use them as a mandatory second factor in a robust MFA setup. OTPs are also vastly superior for users who might have unreliable internet and email access but still maintain steady cellular network connections.
At the end of the day, both Magic Links and OTPs are massive leaps forward. They drastically reduce the everyday friction and the severe security risks associated with traditional passwords. But they do share one critical architectural flaw. They both still rely heavily on external channels. They rely on third-party email providers and aging telecom networks. Channels that, as we've clearly seen, can be spoofed, phished, socially engineered, or intercepted. But it makes you wonder, what if your authentication didn't rely on emails or text at all? What if your user's physical device, like the built-in fingerprint scanner on their laptop, Face ID on their phone, or a dedicated hardware USB security key, acted as the unphishable cryptographic proof of their identity? That is the ultimate frontier of hardware-level security, powered by WebAuthn and biometrics. It completely removes the vulnerable middleman and changes the game entirely. But, that is a deep dive for another time.